Have you ever heard of the day when Rome cried out in despair? Imagine the most powerful empire on earth, capable of subjugating kings and entire nations, brought to its knees by a defeat so brutal that even time could not erase it. 3 legions, more than 20,000 men, were lost in the mud and darkness of a forest. It was not just a defeat, it was a massacre that exposed the vulnerability of an empire that believed itself invincible. Rome, which dictated laws, raised cities, and spread its standards from the Mediterranean to the heart of Europe, was forced to face a bitter truth. Even the gods seemed to have abandoned it that day. What made this tragedy even crueler was that the enemy did not come from outside. The traitor was already infiltrated within the very heart of the empire, waiting for the exact moment to strike. It was not just a day of blood, but the moment when Rome discovered that its greatest weakness could be born from its own trust. If this story has already surprised you, subscribe to the channel now, because here you will discover the darkest secrets Rome tried to hide from the world. At the height of its glory, Rome stood as mistress of the world. Its golden eagles fluttered above conquered walls, its legions crushed rebellions with discipline and brutality, and its generals were feared as demigods. The Senate believed that nothing could stop Rome's advance, not even the northern barbarian tribes, considered primitive and incapable of challenging the power of civilization. But beneath this facade of strength, a silent hatred was growing. Among the forests of Germania, peoples who knew every path, every tree, awaited their chance to avenge the humiliations and tributes imposed upon them. For Rome, they were just insignificant shadows, rough and disorganized warriors. Yet for those who lived among the swamps and dark rivers, Rome was an arrogant invader, a beast that needed to be slain. And it would be a man raised within Rome's own ranks who would wield that resentment as a weapon, turning pride into ruin. If you too are shocked by the cruelty of this massacre, leave a like. This way, you show YouTube that stories like this must be told. This man's name was Arminius. The son of Germanic chieftains, he was handed over to Rome as a child, as a guarantee of loyalty. He grew up in the midst of imperial power, learned Latin, studied military discipline, and was trained as a Roman knight. His rise seemed to be proof of Rome's benevolence, an example of how barbarians could be civilized. But in his heart, the flame of vengeance burned. He knew the customs of his homeland, remembered the humiliations his people endured, and silently swore that one day Rome would pay. His privileged position gave him access to what few barbarians ever learned: the tactics of the legions, the weak points of Roman discipline, the blind trust of arrogant generals. Rome believed it had forged a faithful ally. In truth, it had cultivated the greatest enemy in its history. When the time came, Arminius ceased to be a soldier of Rome. He became the architect of its tragedy. The trap was set in a place that seemed designed by the gods to devour armies. The Teutoburg Forest was not an open field where disciplined formations could shine. It was a labyrinth of dense trees, mud that sucked at men's feet, and narrow trails that turned into lethal traps. Rain poured without ceasing. The skies closed as if conspiring. The sound of footsteps and heavy armor echoed, mixed with the restless snorting of horses. There, every tree was an enemy, every shadow concealed a spear. The legionaries marched, believing themselves in safe territory, guided by a man who seemed an ally, but who was delivering them like sheep to the slaughter. Rome, accustomed to fighting in open fields, was now imprisoned in a green cage where its power was useless. The forest was an invisible enemy, a silent judge that had already condemned the soldiers before the first attack. The massacre began suddenly, as if the forest itself had come alive. Spear after spear cut the air, arrows rained down, and screams echoed from every direction. The legionaries tried to raise their shields, but no formation was possible on the narrow paths. The famous Roman testudo, that wall of iron and discipline, was useless in this terrain. Men slipped in the mud, horses fell in panic, and chaos spread like fire on dry straw. The enemy was not in front, but everywhere. It was like fighting against the forest itself. Arminius, in command, gave the order. None of them were to leave alive. The first day was marked by absolute chaos. More than 5,000 legionaries fell, many without ever seeing the enemy who killed them. Roman pride was wounded, but the tragedy had only just begun. Night brought only more despair. Survivors gathered in small groups, trying to protect themselves as best they could. Fires barely flickered under the constant rain, and the wounded groaned on the soaked ground. The next dawn revealed a spectacle of horror, bodies scattered, standards fallen, and the certainty that they were being hunted. Rome, used to victory through steady advance, now saw its soldiers isolated, cut off from communication, and lacking effective leadership. Every attempt to move forward was crushed by sudden ambushes from all sides. There was no battle, only slaughter. With each hour, the legionaries realized they were not facing mere tribal warriors, but a perfect conspiracy, led by one who knew every weakness of theirs. The forest seemed to close in tighter with each step. Rome was sinking into the mud, and nothing could stop its fall. The second day brought no relief, only more blood. The soldiers, starving and exhausted, tried to build makeshift barricades, but the forest devoured their defenses. Every tree became an enemy tower, every sound a looming ambush. The Germanic tribes attacked like wolves, swift and merciless, vanishing just as quickly. There was no rest, no truce. The enemy surrounded them like an endless shadow. Roman officers tried to maintain order, but even they succumbed to despair. The cries of captives echoed, spreading greater terror. Each moment, more men fell, not only to the enemy's weapons, but to exhaustion, hunger, and fear. Rome, the power that ruled the world, now crawled in the mud, stripped of glory, discipline, and hope. The massacre was no longer just physical, it was psychological. Rome was being torn apart from within. By the third day, what remained of the legions was only a mass of desperate survivors. Many soldiers did not wait for the end. They took their own lives rather than fall into barbarian hands. Others begged for mercy, but found only cruelty. Officers were captured and tortured before their men, i.e., symbol of total humiliation. Then came the most devastating blow. The Roman standard, the sacred eagle, fell into the mud. To Rome, this was not just an object. It was the heart of the legion, the symbol of eternal glory. To see it fallen in the mud was like feeling the empire's very soul crushed. The defeat was no longer just military, it was spiritual. The entire empire lost something far greater than an army that day. To watch the Roman eagle fall was to watch the soul of Rome be trampled. And if you want to know every detail of Rome's greatest defeats and victories, turn on notifications now, because the next chapter will surprise you even more. The final resistance was no more than a faint gasp. Small groups remained, scattered, starving, struggling to survive amidst chaos. The forest, once only a backdrop, was now a living graveyard. The rain washed away the blood, but the stench of death lingered. Rome, once accustomed to deciding the fate of entire peoples, now could not control its own. Arminius, triumphant, watched the collapse of what had once humiliated him. The 17th, 18th, and 19th legions vanished as though they had never existed. There was no return, no survivors to restore the lost honor. Rome did not just lose men, it lost its aura of invincibility. Germania, once dismissed as a land of barbarians, had become the tomb of Roman pride. When the news reached Rome, the entire empire trembled. Emperor Augustus, upon receiving the reports, is said to have struck his head against the wall repeatedly, crying out in despair, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." The weight of that defeat could not be measured in numbers alone. It was a moral wound. Never before had Rome suffered such humiliation. From that moment on, the empire never again dared to advance deeply into Germania. The tragedy of Teutoburg was marked not only as a military defeat, but as the limit of Roman ambition. Rome learned, with blood and shame, that even the mightiest power can be crushed when it trusts too much in its own strength. Augustus's cry echoed as an eternal lament, reminding the world that even giants can fall. And this was only the beginning. Rome swore vengeance, and the counterattack would be brutal. So don't miss the next videos, because you will see how the empire tried to reclaim its honor with blood and fire.